Okay, welcome everyone tonight to week 3 of Eat Clean Get Lean. All right, here we go. I just had to wait for me to go live as well. Welcome everyone to week 3 of Eat Clean Get Lean. I had some great questions come up this week, so I will definitely share them with you. And I just want to welcome everyone on. We have some guests on tonight, some people who are brand new. If you don't have water, get some water if you'd like. I'm going to start in about a minute or two. I'm just waiting for a couple more people to show up into the room. And some great questions, so some of which I'm going to address right off the bat. If you have any questions at all, you certainly can go into the chat box, and you can click on the chat box, and you can be able to ask questions. So I'm going to go ahead and down there, and I'm going to type in greetings, because that's how everyone knows it's from me. I start all my emails off. So there you go, greetings. Let me go ahead and open up my slide deck, and we'll get started in just a minute. I did not have a chance to check Facebook prior to sitting down. I had to go pick my son up from school because it's pouring rain out there, as most of you know. And let me go to slideshow, and we're going to go from the beginning. So I just basically walked back in the door myself. Okay, so we're in week 3 of Eat Clean and Get Lean, and I want to start right off the bat with a question that came up this week with regards to protein powder. Okay, let me just shut my door here. I have a dog that wanders in and out of the room. There we go. Hopefully she's out. Protein powders, the good and the bad, and basically, what does protein do in the body? Let's just go through a real quick review of protein. Protein is one of your 3 macronutrients, like fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Protein is responsible for creating more muscle mass in the body. It also helps you to make hemoglobin, which is the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Your antibodies are protein derivatives. So your immune system is held in check with protein. You have hormones and enzymes. Again, hormones speed things up and slow things down in the body. Enzymes take things apart and put them back together. And then collagen, which is your hair, your skin, your nails, all your ligaments, connective tissue, synovial linings, joint capsules, all that good stuff. So those are the things that are very, very important in the body for function, and you are able to make more of them with the proteins that you eat. So what are some of the advantages of using protein in your diet? And with regards to protein powder, how are these a little bit advantageous as compared to trying to start cooking up a steak or making some eggs? Well, the first thing about protein powder and all proteins is they act as appetite suppressants. Protein satiates you. It makes you feel full. On Thanksgiving Day, when they're having the turkey on the table and they say, who would like some more turkey? Everyone's like, no, thanks. I had enough. I feel good, thanks. Because you feel satisfied. Now, carbohydrate, on the other hand, if they walk out with a big thing of pumpkin pie or apple pie and says, okay, who's up for apple pie? And you might say, well, I have a little bit of room left. Maybe I'll try that because, again, there's an attractiveness to carbohydrate. But protein helps to satisfy you. It also acts as an energy booster, okay? We know that protein can be broken down in the liver and converted into glucose, and glucose is required to run muscle function, but it also feeds the brain and nervous system, so it can give you an energy boost. Nice thing about protein powder is it works very quickly. It digests, it breaks down quickly. It's easy to digest, okay, because it's been slightly processed. And it's convenient and economical. For example, in my office, I keep a big container of protein powder that I use to make my protein smoothie shakes. And economical, it's a lot cheaper than going to McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, you name it, okay? And it's a whole lot better for me as well. So what are some of the things we might need to watch out for? Okay, now included in this presentation tonight, and I guess maybe I kind of skipped over it and I should have made more a reference to it. There were some questions about the efficacy of protein powder, the safety of protein powder, um, what protein powders are better than others. So that's what kind of stirred this whole conversation. I'm going to get into that a little bit in a little more detail in just a minute or two. But some things to watch out for, okay? Make sure the product has an accurate description of the protein type. What is it? Is it soy protein? Is it casein protein? Is it whey protein? Is it vegetable-based proteins? Okay, those are important things to know. If you're trying to stay away from dairy, like most of the people in this food program are, then you don't want to use a whey or casein protein. And we advise people to stay away from soy protein because it really disrupts the hormonal balance in the body for both men and women. And the amount of grams of protein per serving, that's an important thing to know as well, because there are people on the call whose lean mass is, say, about 100 pounds of lean mass, and there's other people on the call whose lean mass is 200 pounds of lean mass. And each of those two people have different protein requirements, okay? So we want to know how many grams of protein you're getting per scoop. Someone came to me the other day and said, this protein powder looks just as good as the one that you advocate, and it's a lot cheaper. And so we looked and we said, okay, well, in the protein powder you're showing me, you need 2 scoops to get 20 grams of protein. And with mine, it's 1 scoop for 20 grams of protein. So in all actuality, the protein that I'm showing you is actually more economical. That made sense. So you got to compare apples to apples. Be sure the product has an accurate reporting of carbohydrate and fat grams per scoop. Now, when we're talking about just pure protein powder, usually carbohydrate and fat grams are not a big deal. However, with a lot of people, they're using meal replacement shakes, protein meal replacement shakes. And when you're using a meal replacement shake, it's going to come with carbohydrate and fat in order to balance out the meal. The problem is, to make it palatable, sometimes what they do is they add more protein, I'm sorry, scratch that. They add more carbohydrate and more fat into the mix because it makes it more palatable, or at least that's what the way they feel about that. Just a quick thing to remember whenever we're addressing a meal replacement, we want the protein plus the fiber to be greater than the carbohydrate plus the fat. And that's all available on your nutrition labels. So that's very easy to find. Okay, the other thing you have to be mindful of, and this is kind of where the question came up, is some products are grown in soil that's been heavily contaminated and may contain high levels of heavy metals, especially lead. And lead is a neurotoxin. Neurotoxin meaning it kills nerve cells. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Now, this is from an article that I received today. So I didn't have much time to rewrite. So basically, I'm just presenting what was in the handout that I received, and this came from Plant Fusion. Story about heavy metals. Heavy metals such as lead, mercury, cadmium, tungsten, and arsenic primarily exist deep in the Earth's crust, but are present throughout our environment in very low levels. In the last 100 years, we've seen increased levels of these substances in our agricultural soil, due to human influences such as mining, manufacturing, and the use of synthetic products such as pesticides, paints, batteries, industrial waste, and fertilizers. Whether or not the metals end up being absorbed by plants depends largely on the relationship between the plant and the soil. For example, soil type, climate, soil management, metal, chemical form, plant species, and other varieties. It is debated as to what level of these metals is considered to be detrimental to human health, and there are very few standards specific to natural products. But the bottom line is that you want to try to avoid them whenever possible. Okay, now some of the cheaper protein powders that we looked at today had higher levels of nitrogen to try to make it look like the protein levels were higher. But remember, protein is not just nitrogen. Protein is nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a specific sequence, a genetic sequence, to make up different proteins. So just putting more nitrogen into a product doesn't mean you've increased the protein in that product. Okay, now a lot of the good or the better protein powders have eliminated brown rice as one of the 4 sources. So Plant Fusion that we advocate no longer uses brown rice as their protein source. And what's the problem with brown rice? Well, some plants are considered to be hyperaccumulators, which means that they tend to absorb far more heavy metals out of the soil as compared to other plant species. I mentioned that in the paragraph prior when we were talking about different types of plants. When the science team at Plant Fusion began studying plant proteins a number of years ago, we became aware of these hyperaccumulators. One in particular we identified was the cereal grain brown rice. In addition to being a hyperaccumulator, rice is also cultivated in low-lying regions. This is important because the water runoff from surrounding regions flows down into the rice growing areas. This water runoff carries good stuff like nutrients, but can also carry some bad stuff like pesticides, chemicals, and heavy metals. This is why, even though the rice crop itself may be grown under organic standards, the soil it is being grown in may still be contaminated by the runoff from surrounding areas that stretches out for miles. Now, one of the regions that has come under some very specific scrutiny is rice that's grown in China, because their environmental policies differ tremendously from that of United States, Canada, and most of Europe. So the brown rice that we advocate is never going to come from China. You're going to look to see where it came from. One example that Plant Fusion uses in their literature is they get some of their rice from North America and also Belgium. I never thought Belgium was a big rice growing place, but obviously a rice growing country, but obviously they are. I just thought they were famous for waffles and ales, but that's another story. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about protein powder and the facts about Plant Fusion. And the reason I'm giving you so much information on Plant Fusion is this is one of the protein powders that Susan and I advocate. We've been using it. A lot of our clients use it. It's very palatable. It's easy to use. We feel it's very economical, so we continue to use it. Okay, as a result of their research at Plant Fusion, they stopped using brown rice protein in all Plant Fusion products way back in the summer of 2011. And while there will always be some variation that occurs from batch to batch, we continuously screen all of their ingredients for heavy metals to ensure that they achieve the lowest levels possible in nature. The testing protocols that they've refined over the years allow us to consistently achieve levels that not only are considered safe, but also many times lower than those recommended by the AHPA, the American Herbal Products Association. So you can see the chart below that there are recommended levels of, say, arsenic, cadmium, and lead. You want to be below these levels, and Plant Fusion here is showing that they're far below those levels. And then here are my resources for all the information that I was able to gather up today. The first one is from a company called Consumer Lab. I found that website on the Dr. Oz website. The Dr. Oz website was recommended to us by one of our clients, and we want to thank them for that. So I went on and I watched the videos that were associated with that and read the text. And then I was able to get a free 24-hour membership to this consumerlab.com, and they went through and they reviewed a whole host of different protein powders. And the reference on the bottom from naturalnews.com, they went through and also evaluated a number of different vegetarian-based protein powders. So if you want to read their results, that reference is also on the bottom of this page. Okay, if there's any more questions about protein and protein powders, I'd love to be able to discuss it. But at this point, let's move on. let's just do a quick review of what we're all doing. We're into week 3, and this is where things start to change. You've gotten videos from us on the sputter effect, how your body is switching from looking for sugar as a primary fuel source to fat as a primary fuel source. You've gotten videos on cacao. You've gotten videos on a whole host of things that we feel are important for you to understand as you go through this process. And of course, one of the videos you've gotten was about Heck and Check. So again, I'm going to bring this up real quick. We want to make sure that day in, day out, morning, noon, and night, we keep your hunger at less than 5, your energy stays at a 6 level or above, and your cravings stay lower than 5. We're going to assess as we go through the course of the day how we're feeling. Is our Heck and Check. Again, every week we're taking our circumference measurements and our weight. We're plugging it into the metabolic effect shape calculator, and I know I've been getting some results from some of you, which is great. So I get to follow your progress. Somebody told me they lost 11 pounds so far in the first 2 weeks, so congratulations there. That's totally awesome. I sound like I'm from California. Totally awesome. If anyone's getting any blood work done, physicals, and you want to share that information with us, that'd be great too. The 4 scenarios I'll get into in a minute. And what are we modifying? We're looking at adding protein, fat, and water to control Heck, and carbs and fats being adjusted when we're not losing weight. So again, as a reminder, how do we get our Heck in check? Well, step 1 is to make sure that we have adequate amounts of protein, fiber, and water in all of our meals. If we're still hungry and we still have cravings and our energy is dropping out, we can add fat into a meal. That can be in the form of avocado, coconut oil, chia seed, a nut butter like almond butter, cashew butter. Okay, if that's not working, then we take the fat out of the meal and we add in starch. And I always talk to people about adding bites of carbohydrate. To me, that's very easy. So bites or a half a cup. Now, again, I'm talking to a couple different audiences here. 3 bites for someone who's at 100 pounds lean mass is more like 6 bites for someone who's at 200 pounds lean mass. So you can't compare apples to oranges. Okay, you can't feed a 200-pound male the same way you would feed a 100-pound woman. All right, that won't work, and that'll increase the hunger and the cravings, and then things become really unbalanced. And then what happens is we go off of our program, we start reaching for whatever we can get our hands on. If that doesn't work, again, we're going to add both the fat and the starch back into a meal. So the example I give here is the sweet potato with olive oil. We're trying to stay away from butter only for the fact that we're trying to stay dairy free for the first 4 weeks. And olive oil seems to be a very easy thing to do. Another great one in the morning is mixing a tablespoon of coconut oil in with your oatmeal. That works very well. And of course, if you want to add your protein powder in there too, so we make sure we have fats, carbs, and protein. And if that doesn't work, we start to add the snacks. Snacks are like your teas, your branched chain amino acids, your cacao drink with the chai tea. If you want to go Thai, let's try this again. Chai tea, which is not Tai Chi, with your cacao and your stevia. Again, the cacao is going to help with serotonin, dopamine levels. It's going to help to make you more confident, more focused, more motivated, and so forth. So those are your 5 steps. Again, if your Heck is in check and you're still losing weight, don't change anything. If your Heck is not in check, okay, your Heck is not in check, but you're still losing weight, then you need to add more protein per meal, more fiber per meal, and you have to add more water per meal. And hint, hint, you can add branched chain amino acids to that water, which will definitely help to keep your hunger and your cravings in check. And also boost your energy, right? Because remember, we just talked about how protein can boost energy, and branched chain amino acids are 4 of your essential amino acids. Okay, if your Heck is in check, but you're not losing weight, now we have to start to look at adjusting our carbohydrates down. We may have to also look at adjusting our fats down per meal. Probably easier to adjust the carbohydrates down per meal. Okay, fat tends to not be as big of an issue as carbohydrate. Now, let me just stop and remind everyone that the reason that carbohydrate has such an effect on us is because if we look back 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, okay, when we were hunting and we were gathering, we didn't stumble across sweet potatoes and brown rice and oatmeal that easily. As a matter of fact, probably hardly ever. So we are beings that when we see carbohydrate, we know that we may not get it again for quite some time, except for the, fibrous carbohydrates and some of the fruits that we might have stumbled across, some berries like blueberries and so forth. But certainly not sweet potatoes. We're not going to hang around waiting for sweet potatoes to grow in the ground when we're chasing after the antelope. So our brains are designed to, whenever we get carbohydrate, to eat it. So now it's 2014 and food is plentiful. So we need to be able to use some judgment in adding carbohydrate into our diet. So we have to stay a little bit more in control because food is plentiful. But that's why carbohydrate tends to have such an attractiveness to us because, again, we're the same beings we were 50,000 years ago. No difference genetically, physiologically, we're exactly the same. Okay, if HEC is not in check and you're not losing weight, immediately go ahead and increase the protein, the fiber, and the water in the meals. Start to cut back on fats and carbohydrate per meals. Try to cut back on the snacks between the meals. Be sure to walk at least 1 hour or more daily. Okay, that will really help with our keeping our HEC in check, balancing out our hormones. Okay, work on getting 8 hours of sleep per night. And that's not sleeping from 2 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the morning, okay? That's sleeping like 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? That'll get you a lot further down the road. You really need to be asleep by 11 o'clock. I think that's critical to your success. And so we'll start with that. And for a lot of us who are wearing Fitbits like myself, I can tell the computer in the morning what time I went to bed last night and what time I got up in the morning, and it tells me how effective my sleep was or how much quality of sleep I had. It tells me when I wake up, so it tells me exactly how much true sleep I'm getting every night. And last but not least, performing at least 2 resistance training sessions per week and working the muscles to temporary muscle failure, as we've discussed. Okay, now I want to switch gears. If you need a drink of water, take it. I just took mine. I wanted to talk a little bit about alcohol and fat loss. Now, one of the foods that we asked you to abstain from for the first 4 weeks is alcohol. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the hows and the whys of that. Susan and I have done a lot of research on this over the years. And it's amazing when you start to hear yourself speak, you actually start to believe your own stuff. And not that it's any big deal. This is certainly not being braggadocious or anything like that. But this year, for the first time maybe ever since I turned of legal drinking age, I really have cut alcohol out of my diet. And I got to tell you, for a guy who has had inflammation issues, herniated disc, arthritis in my knees and my shoulder, I do feel a whole lot better. So there is something to it. It also has allowed me to stay in better shape, quite frankly. And I was a big, let's have a glass or 2 of wine on Saturday night. I wasn't drinking every night, but I will tell you, even cutting that out has made a difference. So let's talk a little bit about this. Studies have shown that even small amounts of alcohol have a large impact on fat metabolism. Dropping whole body lipid oxidation, a measurement of how much fat your body is burning, by 73%. So if you're adding something into your nutrition program and it's slowing fat metabolism down by 73%, that's highly significant. Okay, let's move on. Okay. The reason why alcohol has this dramatic effect on fat metabolism has to do with the way alcohol is handled in the body. When alcohol is consumed, it readily passes from the stomach and intestines into the blood and goes directly to the liver. In the liver, an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase mediates the conversion of alcohol to something called acetyl let's try this again. Acetaldehyde. Ooh, that was a tough one. I usually just rolls off my tongue. Important thing to know here is if you look on any of your medications that are liquids like cough syrup, you're going to notice it's in an alcohol base. The reason for that is that anything that's taken with that alcohol gets drawn to the liver, and the liver, what the liver does in the body in this circumstance is it takes it in and then gives it back out to the body as it feels the body needs to use it. So putting alcohol in a cough syrup helps you to metabolize it a whole lot quicker. It moves it into the system so that if you're coughing and you're trying to go to sleep, it'll start to help remedy the cough a whole lot faster than if it wasn't in an alcohol base. So alcohol draws it out of the digestive system real quick, basically, and puts it to work very, very quickly. Okay. So now the alcohol is rapidly converted to acetate by other enzymes. So rather than getting stored as fat, the main fate of alcohol is a conversion to something called acetate. And the amount of acetate formed is dose dependent on the amount of alcohol you consumed. For example, blood levels of acetate after drinking vodka are 2.5 times higher than normal. And it appears that this sharp rise in acetate puts the brakes on fat loss. Okay, so here's a little diagram here. We know that alcohol has 7 calories per gram, as compared to regular carbohydrate that has 4 calories per gram, and fat has 9 calories per gram. So now the alcohol converts to this acetate, which is used in the Krebs cycle of energy metabolism. Okay, what happens is in the cells of your body are your mitochondria. And in the mitochondria is that where you convert fat and oxygen to energy. Now, sugar is also part of that. And the sugar compound is called acetate. Okay, so just so you know, everyone's on the same page with me here. Okay, so the acetate is used in the Krebs cycle of energy metabolism, so it will burn before the body burns anything else, including fat. Okay, since alcohol is almost double the amount of calories in carbohydrate, it takes twice as long to burn off, slowing fat burning even further. With alcohol in the system, insulin levels increase, and it systematically lowers resting blood sugar levels. Insulin is what I call a heat-seeking missile. It will stay active until it acts on sugar, including resting blood sugar. Okay, so let's just stop here and learn a little bit. The acetate, which comes from the alcohol, is used in the Krebs cycle for energy metabolism in the cells of the body. But what do we know about glucose? One of the first things I taught you about glucose is it is the primary fuel source for the brain and the nervous system. But alcohol or acetate cannot be converted into glucose and used to feed the brain and the nervous system. So after the acetate levels go high enough and your blood sugar goes high enough because of the acetate, okay, the insulin is going to start to store it, but you only have a finite amount of storage in the liver, and you only have a finite amount of storage in the muscles. So anything extra is going to be converted to triglyceride and stored as fat. Now, here comes the other problem. Your brain is still looking for glucose, and it can't use the alcohol you just consumed. So now the body has to go back and start breaking down protein to convert that to glucose in order to feed the brain and nervous system. So we're really running into a real catch-22 here. You're breaking down protein, which slows down your metabolism, and you're accelerating fat storage because you're taking all that extra acetate that was converted from alcohol and you're storing it as fat. So you kind of see where we're going with this. It really becomes a real inhibitor to fat loss. Okay, so let's kind of summarize here. More carbohydrates are moving into storage from blood sugar, and now, again, this is a good point, which increases hunger and cravings. Hunger because the brain cannot metabolize alcohol for energy, and cravings due to increased consumption of carbohydrates to feed the brain and nervous system. Okay, so what that's really saying is now because the alcohol is going to have your blood sugar drop so quickly, you're going to be looking for anything to eat you can get your hands on. So we have many hormonal shifts going on. Here's something else that's interesting. We've talked about this in previous talks. We have two enzymes that work in the body. One is called hormone-sensitive lipase, which is a fat-burning enzyme. And we have lipoprotein lipase, which is a fat-storing hormone enzyme. Sorry. So we have a decrease in our fat-burning enzymes, and we have an increase in our fat-storing enzymes. So that further accelerates the process. What else are we talking about here? Decreasing testosterone. Why is that important? Okay, testosterone is what you use to build lean mass and for tissue repair. So you're actually decreasing your body's ability to repair itself. And now you're increasing inflammation, swelling such as abdominal swelling, and I call it moon face. There's so many people we see in that 21, 22-year-old, they're in college, and they start drinking alcohol, and all of a sudden you could just see their face gets really, for lack of better terms, fat and swollen, and it doesn't match the rest of their body. It's very interesting how that effect the alcohol has the effect on these people, and I witnessed it personally when I was in college. So, in conclusion, in our 12-week program, there's no alcohol consumption because what are most of us here to do? We're here to eat clean and get lean. I know this is going to bring up a whole host of questions, and I'm dying to answer them. Okay, again, just as a review, the first 4 weeks we had talked about abstaining from certain foods. We talked about soy because its ability to throw hormones off, alcohol, I kind of just addressed that, wheat, gluten, corn and other grains, dairy, artificial sweeteners, and other food chemicals. Why the artificial sweeteners? Why the other food chemicals? In the very first conversation we had, we talked about something called the weight regulating mechanism in your brain. And how is it influenced? It's influenced by things like stress. It's influenced by the amount of exercise you do. It's affected by your blood sugar, and it's also highly affected by food chemicals and food additives. Okay, those can all throw off the weight regulating mechanism and cause you to store more body fat. Okay, let's move into walking. Okay, walking is such a crucial component to this program. Walking an hour a day makes a tremendous difference in our ability to balance out our hormones and help us to lose weight. So let me kind of go through these, and then I'll kind of wrap it up with some thoughts and ideas I have with regards to walking. Okay, walking facilitates something called gene expression, changing how our genes, which are proteins, align themselves, and how the cell membrane communicates with the nucleus of the cell to either increase or decrease the production of fat-burning enzymes and hormones. So it's all about perception. Okay, body weight, like so many of our individual characteristics, is a combined result of the genes we're born with and the way we live our lives. How much and what we eat and whether we exercise. The question is, how does one influence the other? So we have some studies that were done. There was a study done up at the Harvard, and this researcher and his colleagues say that walking for about an hour a day can reduce the weight promoting effect of certain genes by 50%. What's more, the scientists say sedentary activities like watching TV and playing video games can trigger the weight gaining effect of the very same genes. Okay, last year there was a study in a journal called Menopause, the Journal of the North American Menopause Society, and they suggested that walking at least 10,000 steps a day doesn't necessarily boost muscle strength or balance for women, but it does have an effect on decreasing body fat and weight. The women in the study were between 50 and 70 years old, and Reuters reported this. So we talked about 10,000 steps a day. People are like, how do I track my steps a day? Well, you can use a pedometer, or I know myself and some other people who are on the call tonight, we use something called a Fitbit, and it tracks my steps daily. I walk over 2 miles a day in my office. I find that to be amazing. But my goal is those 10,000 steps a day. And it's really kind of nice because we have a little Fitbit friend group, so to say, with people that I know, and we all try to outwalk ourselves every day. So we have a little competition. But my primary goal is set at 10,000 steps a day, which on a day like this is pretty difficult. So when I go in tomorrow morning, I did do some walking in my office today outside of my normal routine of training clients. So hopefully I hit my 10,000 step goal. But in a nor'easter, it makes it a little harder to go out and walk on the boardwalk. So in conclusion, with regards to walking, the authors acknowledge that it may not be the act of TV watching itself that enhances the activity of the weight-promoting genes. It may be that people who watch more TV also tend to eat more and exercise less. For example, that's just an example. But the latest findings provide some hope that even if you're not blessed with lean genes, and many of us aren't, you can still modify the fattening effect of your DNA by changing how you live your life. Okay, and that's by going through a program like you're doing now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this to the side here. Let's minimize that. And I'm going to look to see if we got any questions that have come in, because I dumped a lot on you tonight. We talked about protein powder, right? I'm going to type you guys a little message here. We talked about protein powder. We talked about alcohol. We reviewed our program, right? Reviewed what we're doing with the Eat Clean, Get Lean. And we just talked about walking. Okay, so okay, here we go. Thanks for the info. Laugh out loud. Okay, got that. Susan says hello. She's in the other room, making sure that I'm doing a good job here. One of the things I want to just talk about walking while I'm waiting for any questions that might pop up is I really think you have to understand that when you walk, I believe that your brain acknowledges that everything is okay and food is plentiful. When our ancestors walked, they walked because they were out tracking food, they were gathering food, they were hunting for food, they were prospering. And the only time they sat for prolonged periods of time, you've heard me probably say this before, is when there was no food available or the weather outside was inclement and they couldn't eat. They had no food coming in. So the act of prolonged sitting sends very strong signals to our brain and nervous system that we're not in the process of prospering and we need to conserve energy. So that's when we start breaking down things like dehydrogenase, which is one of our fat-burning enzymes. And why is that? Well, one of the things we also break down, we want to conserve fat. But one of the other things we break down, we start to cannibalize our own lean mass. So cortisol levels start to go up. And the reason we start to break down the lean mass is it's the way to slow the engine down. We slow the engine down, we burn less fuel, and we can live for a longer amount of time. So sometimes people say, well, should I be out running? No, we've kind of discussed that. We don't, unless you feel like you have to go out and run, I'd much rather you do some burst training, which you'll have the video on that, on a bike or an elliptical. Or if you want to do it outside, you simply walk and then you pick 2 spots. It'll take you about 10 seconds to run, and you do an all-out sprint, nonstop, as hard as you can, as fast as you can. Okay, so someone just popped up, walking versus light jogging. A lot of us, well, first of all, let's talk turkey here. There's some of us who are not at our optimal goal weight right now, And the act of running would probably put a lot of stress on a lot of our joints, your lumbar discs, your hip joints, your knee joints, your foot and ankle. We kind of ignore the foot and ankle, but there's a lot going on down there. Someone like myself who's had 3 knee surgeries, it's changed the relationship on how I balance out my lower body. So to fix that, I've gone to using orthotics. Okay, orthotics help me to keep my knee in alignment, so I have less knee problems. But if I went out and ran on a knee that's been operated on 3 times, probably a tremendous amount of stress in the knee and could create a whole lot of problems. So we say walking, and when I say walking, I mean walking as if you're out walking your dog. It's not a fast walk. It's not a power walk. It's a walk. Okay? Let's save the breathless and burning for the resistance training and the sprinting. Okay? So a good question. So we want to walk. We want to walk at a moderate pace for at least an hour. If it's 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, because you have to balancing out, that's fine. But let's really focus on the walking. And then when we do our resistance training, I want you to do 10 repetitions, and I want you to go to the point where you can't lift the weight anymore. Now, if you squeak out 11 or 12, no big deal. But if you're hitting 14, 15, 16, the weight's too light. If you can only do it 6 times, the weight's too heavy. Okay, remember, we talk about time and tension. We need enough tension to get enough muscle recruitment, but we need enough time to produce the amount of work needed to get that lactic acid level up so that we start to get the positive hormonal responses. This is a good train of thought. People are like, well, why don't we just lift a heavier weight, 4 times, because then that would really get a tremendous amount of recruitment. The problem lies in the fact that if you don't have enough time, then you can't get enough lactic acid buildup because you stop the exercise prematurely. So it's a combination of both. You need enough resistance to get maximum muscle recruitment, but you need enough time under tension to get the lactic acid level up. Now, here's a trick. If you get to 12 and you still feel like you got a little bit left, what I do is I bring the weight down to about halfway down. So let's just pretend we're all doing a bench press. Okay. Instead of the weight being all the way at the top, I'm going to bring it down about halfway, and I'm going to do an isometric hold. And I'm going to just squeeze as if I'm trying to push the weight back up. So anyone who's ever trained with me, we always do an isometric hold at the end. And what do I always ask you? I said, do you feel the breathlessness? Do you feel the burning? Okay, I know there's a couple heads shaking out there because I'm looking at the people who train with me, and they would know that. So there's a lot of tricks that we can go along, and I hopefully in the next, as the weeks go on, we get into more training, I'm going to be able to talk a little bit more about that. So we have the intense exercise with the resistance training, we have the sprinting, the burst training, and then we have walking. Okay. Someone wrote, would 1 or 2 drinks have the same impact? And I know it's impact because the Y is right next to the T on the keyboard. Well, obviously we talked about vodka earlier, and we talked about its impact. I guess the more you have, the greater the impact. So basically what we're really talking about is in those first couple of weeks, first 4 weeks, we want to eliminate it completely. And I think that would go a long way to hitting your goals and also trying to minimize the negative hormonal response and enzyme response of the alcohol. Okay. Now here's something I get too, and I'm glad I'm back to alcohol again. Okay. We know some really great friends of ours. Okay, they're in phenomenal shape. They're both very lean. They're very attractive, healthy. They're really in a good place. Okay, and the key to this is that they're very lean to begin with, and we've been out with them many times, and they probably consume alcohol maybe 2 or 3 times a week. For dinner, wine. They like their martinis. They like their vodka drinks and stuff like that. And the question always comes as to how come they're not gaining a lot of weight? Well, they are so close, if not at their goal body weight and their goal percent body fat, that they're not trying to burn fat. They don't need to burn a lot of stored body fat. They're at that level. So they can handle the alcohol in a lot different way than someone whose goal is to continue or accelerate the fat burning process, because they're already there. And probably if they were to gain a couple pounds and it wasn't to their liking, they probably could make a very quick change and probably eliminate that problem. I will also tell you, I've trained with both of them. I've trained them as clients, and I've trained with them just to work out, and they work out extremely aggressively. They eat really well, and they have a very healthy lifestyle, but they can consume alcohol and not have them affect them as it would someone like myself, who still feels like I could still lose 10 pounds of body fat if I want to, I need to. Alcohol is going to affect me a whole lot different than it affects them, because they're already at or very close to their percent body fat and their lean mass and their weight. Okay, I don't see any other questions popping up. So if you do have questions, I want everyone to feel free to reach out to me in Facebook. There's a couple of people that have been contacting me by email. Not a problem. Let's just keep that going, because I want to keep the lines of communication open. And I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their evening to join us this evening. Drive safe. The rain's not going to end till sometime on Thursday. Watch out for flooding. Don't try to drive through big puddles. You don't want your car stalling out or seizing your engine. All right. Take care, and I'll talk to everyone real soon. Have a great night.